Hi everyone, my name is Alexa, and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Until I figure that out, I'm going to interview people with different jobs. I created Behind the Career to help high schoolers like myself explore different careers and what it took to get there. Today, we're interviewing self proclaimed Christmas tree nerd, as well as founder and CEO of Balsam Brands, Harman. For those of you who don't know, Balsam Brands is the #1 brand in America that sells artificial premium Christmas trees like this one here. Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Alexa.
So I guess we'll just get into the questions. Could you describe a little bit about what you do and the main responsibilities of your job?
Sure. Would you like me to describe it where I am today or early on, or do you have a
Um,
preference?
Maybe where you are today, and then we'll go early on later.
Sure. Yeah. So at this point, our company's gotten to be somewhat large. We're across Europe, North America, and Australia. And so we have hundreds of members of our team. And so my job at a high level is kind of strategy, just helping us think about what do we want to do as a company, what are the most important things for us. I am still involved in running the business on a day-to-day basis, but it's kind of a bifurcation between high level strategy and then some of the running the business pieces. I think one of the other things that is really important to us as a long term focused privately held company is our culture. And so while I can't make a culture, I think culture is something that you can try and influence, but it's made up of all the people in our company and how they interact with each other. But I do try and help shepherd our culture and lead that culture and provide kind of guidance and wisdom. And as maybe if something happens, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that feels quite right for us as a company, then maybe get involved in changing that. So I think at our size, the strategy and the culture are the two most important things I do. But as a very seasonal business, as you might imagine, selling Christmas decorations is pretty busy from a revenue standpoint some of the year versus other times. I do get involved in kind of helping run the business in those busy times of year.
Interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about how the company works seasonally? Most people think Christmas trees are only after Thanksgiving, around the winter season, but more about like how it is year round.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things we have as a retailer is that we buy products from manufacturers who make them to our specifications, and then we hold on to them and then we sell them. And so if we were selling milk or something like that, people generally consume the same amount of milk year round. So we might produce the milk or buy the milk, but we would cycle through it pretty quickly. In our business, it's interesting because people generally only buy Christmas trees in kind of November-ish, plus or minus a month or so. And so we buy all the inventory, which takes up cash, and then it's sitting there, and then we sell it all, and we've got to get it to people in a really quick amount of time. And so if you think about in North America, like FedEx or UPS, like we're one of their biggest volume customers because Christmas trees are big and we ship them all in like a 3 or 4 week period. And that it's not totally that seasonal. We do sell Christmas trees every day of the year. And actually, believe it or not, people who are really into Christmas start buying in June and July. But by the time you get to Thanksgiving weekend, that is like our Super Bowl of retail, which it is for most retailers. Black Friday is called Black Friday because it's the day that most retailers go from red to black, meaning unprofitable to profitable. It's certainly our biggest day of the year every year. But that is a challenge for us is how do we have great customer service.
Okay, so now that we know a lot of your main responsibilities, what does a day of work look like for you?
So for me, every day of work is really different. And I often answer this question by opening up a random day in my calendar and walking through it, but I'll try and do it without using my phone. So I travel a lot for work. One of our company values is building relationships. And so I'm often out in our different locations around the world, whether it's our own offices or where we have members of our remote team, spending time with them, or it's with vendors or suppliers or key partners. I do a bunch of media interviews, that kind of thing. So I travel a lot, but when I'm in town, like I can walk you through a Monday as an example. On Mondays, we start the day, start every day of the week actually, Monday through Friday with a 15-minute huddle. And that's the 23 people on our leadership team get together. We generally stand up. It's called a stand up, and everyone goes around and shares a round of news. If you have news, you share what your news is. If you don't, you pass. Then we go into what our priority for the day is, and if there's anything that's blocking us from accomplishing something or someone on our team from getting something done. And so we go around in 3 rounds quickly, and actually usually takes about 10 minutes. And so we do that Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock Pacific time every day, with our 23 members of our leadership team. And then right after that, we have functional huddles. So the head of marketing will go do that same process with the marketing team, and the CTO will do that with the technology team, et cetera. And so that's kind of how we cascade information through the company quickly, and also identify kind of things that might be keeping us from achieving our goals. It's also an opportunity for me to hear what is everybody up to, and do those sound like the right priorities for us as a company. And so part of my job is pattern recognition of, does this sound like the right things that we should or shouldn't be doing? After that, on Mondays, I generally have our executive team meeting where we go over sort of strategic topics or check in on different things. Our leadership team meeting, which is that same group of 20 people, but we might tackle one or two topics. And we also look at key metrics for how the business is performing. But any other day of the week, I might be looking at product. I still design our Christmas trees, so I might be spending time in our R&D center, kind of working on new innovations in Christmas trees or new designs. So it's always something different, and I think that's why after 19 years of doing this, I still enjoy it, because there's a lot of variety in what I'm up to.
Interesting. That sounds like a lot. So, what makes your day like a good day?
I think for me, a good day is something where I do something that gives me energy. So whether that's being in a meeting where we're brainstorming ideas, I'm an entrepreneur, from the beginning. And so, kind of thinking about new ways of doing things or coming up with new innovations, those give me energy. We've started a new business that's a retail store selling ornaments to tourists to help them remember their vacation. I get a lot of energy thinking about that because it's new and it's different, and we've never done something like that before. Generally, when I'm working with product, like designing new trees or looking at new storage bags for Christmas decorations or whatever it is, like when I'm around product, I get a lot of energy. And then another way I get energy is when I travel. I actually really enjoy travel. A lot of people find it stressful, but I get energy from travel and almost treat it like a sport. So I guess since I'm not good at a lot of other sports, I can be good at travel and pretend it's a sport. So those things are good days.
Okay, so now that we know like more about what you do, can you describe what the journey was to get there? Did you always know that you wanted to create a company, or were there any like turning points or moments that led you to where you are?
Yeah, I think I was always really entrepreneurial as a kid. So, I mean, from a very young age, I was starting little businesses in my front yard, whether it's lemonade stand or whatever. So, I was always innovating. And that was probably in part because I grew up around my dad, who ran a small business. So, I always kind of thought about business decisions, and he brought me into some of the decisions he would make as a small business owner. But then I got super busy with high school, which is where you and your audience are. And I was
Yeah.
so busy. I was at a academically challenging high school, and I mean, I think I was doing, like, in my mind at least. We always say, like, we parents probably say it was harder than it really was, but in my mind, I remember doing like 4 hours of homework every night, and so it was just a lot of work. And so I kind of forgot about being an entrepreneur. And then I went to college, and I wasn't like starting businesses, but in college I got super involved in lots of different activities and growing these different clubs. And so that was kind of entrepreneurial. And then I went off, and at the end of college, I sort of made this decision between going into an industry that I really, really liked, which was the ski area industry, like ski resorts. I love ski resorts. I know it's weird. Um, and I had the opportunity to do that, or going into management consulting. So I ultimately chose to go into management consulting because I felt like it might open some doors. Whereas if I went into the ski industry, it might be hard to pivot if I didn't like it and do something else later. And so that was the start of my post educational career. I did that, a number of other roles. Unfortunately, my father actually passed away. And so I ended up, it was only supposed to be for a few months, but I ended up running his small business for 7 years, as we tried to kind of turn it around and sell it, to financially support my mom. And so that was a really interesting experience that was a juxtaposition between running a very small business and working at the same time at some really large companies that just really put things in perspective for me, and I think prepared me to be an entrepreneur, even though at the time I wasn't thinking about starting a company at all. But it just helped me think about, okay, here's how these really big Fortune 50 brand names that we all know, how they operate, and then here's a company that's trying to make payroll sometimes, and like it's it was really a good juxtaposition for me. And then I ended up going to graduate school and went to business school for 2 years and came out of that. And that's where I realized, oh, I really liked being an entrepreneur. Maybe I should try and start a company, which was not why I applied to business school. But I decided to kind of put other career options on hold and start a business. And that's what ultimately led to starting Balsam Hill. And 19 years later, here I am still doing that. It's been almost 2 decades, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think because the business has grown, there's always new things to learn, and that's what's given me energy to continue doing the same thing.
Okay, so you mentioned there's a lot of new things to learn. What would you say the biggest lesson is in the 19 years that you've learned?
I'd say I'd even expand it from the 19 years in this business to my whole career post college. Working with great people, I think for me is more important than anything else. So when I was a consultant and we worked on different projects for 3 to 6 months, eventually you kind of earned the right to try to influence what project you got assigned to, and you could try and go on the really like super cool project or work with the really good people. And I always tried to influence to work with the people who I thought had the best values around working hard and playing hard and prioritizing family. And I think that's kind of what, I had an amazing time as a consultant. Not everyone did. Um, and I carried that forward into Balsam Hill, where we try and we all are A types that want to win and do our best and really delight our customers. And our company purpose is to create joy together. And we inside the company with our partners and our communities, and of course our customers. We want them all to create joy together, and we're really focused on that. At the same time, I think we also have the values where, when someone is sick or needs help or whatever it might be, like we're all about supporting them and just kind of prioritizing things in the right way. And so I think that's been my biggest learning, is that no matter whether we were a 5-person company or a multi-100-person company, like really putting people first and thinking about people as individuals and recognizing that there's more to life than a number on a spreadsheet. I think that's really been the biggest thing, and just making sure that I enjoy what I do, because I think, and I learned this because I lost my dad early on, like life's too short not to enjoy what you do if you are blessed to have that choice. Not everyone in the world has that choice. There's tens of millions of people, sadly, that are in slavery, like literally have no choice. But probably most people watching this podcast have a choice, and so I would say making sure that you enjoy what you do is super important.
So, if a high schooler wanted to also start a company, what are some classes or experiences that you would recommend?
Great question. I'd say probably two things come to mind there. The first one would be on sort of the experiences, like anything you can do to try something new, be entrepreneurial, whether that's like starting a business or working for a small business, and really seeing kind of how things happen in the trenches, especially as someone's maybe figuring out something new. So, like, if you have a chance to go work somewhere that's new, that doesn't have established processes, that might be really, really instructive. Um, and then in terms of kind of like academic experiences or classroom experiences or school experiences you can have, I think anything that really teaches you how to think could be really valuable. And so at the end of the day, I think in high school, it was still valuable for me to learn things like calculus and other things. Do I use calculus today? No. Are you better at calculus than I am? Definitely, because I don't remember it. But I think the discipline and the learning and some of the principles of the academic subjects were really valuable. But if there's classes you can take that really push you to think because there isn't a clear answer, I think those are the most helpful things in life. And so I'll give you an example. For me, this was in college, not high school. But I got to college and I intentionally went to a liberal arts school, which is more known for teaching you how to think than, say, you went to University of something to study physics, where you're going to take all these physics classes. And part of why I did that was in high school, I felt like I don't know what I want to do when I'm an adult, and I don't know what subject I want to major in yet. I don't feel like I've gotten exposed to all the choices. And so I took a class, one of my very first classes, first semester of college, that was a introduction to geology class. And geology, there's also like rocks for jocks, which are known as like the easy geology class that you take if you're an athlete and aren't really trying to work that hard. No offense to any athletes out there. This was not that class, is the point. This was for people who were really intellectually curious. And I took this class, and it just exposed me to a subject I knew nothing about. And, in geology, you're like trying to figure out what happened a long time ago or what's happening underground. And like, it's not clear. And so that was a class that really taught me, and ended up that was one of my majors. And geology really helped me more than I ever could have imagined in business, because it was all about looking at some things, some data, some rocks in a field or whatever, and figuring out what happened a zillion years ago. And I think that sort of independent thinking helped me so much. So the extent to which in high school you can take a class that pushes you to think differently, to really think, and where it's unclear, what the right answer is, maybe that's an English class. What was the author really thinking? Well, your teacher might have a viewpoint on that, but like the author might not still be alive. So you can't really, nobody really knows, right? And so classes that really push you like that, I think, can be super helpful. And then the other thing I would encourage in high school is like, look at the clubs and extracurriculars that your school offers. And is there one that you could be kind of entrepreneurial in, whether it's in leading the club or helping start a new club or working with a new faculty advisor or something like that? I think that can really give you some of the skills and experience that you would need if you want to be an entrepreneur someday. I know in high school, I ended up working with the newspaper a lot, and for some of you, newspaper is how we got news before computers. Yeah, I'm kidding. I hope people still know what it is, but like it's kind of funny. That's what I was involved in, and we had word processors, so we'd like type these articles up, we'd print them, we'd literally cut them out and glue stick them, and then this thing would get like reproduced. But that gave me a lot of experience because I got to write some of the big stories and go interview, you know, for our school, like important donors or the president of the school or whatever it was. And that just gave me interesting exposure. And then I got to start leading the team and figuring out what did we want the paper to look like. And so those kinds of experiences, I think, are really undervalued leadership experiences. Like I know sometimes maybe it's like, oh, I want to run this club because it'll look good on my college app or something like that. But at the end of the day, when you look back decades later, being involved in some of these clubs and extracurriculars, kind of independent of what the extracurricular actually is, the experience you have leading it can be super valuable later in life.
Interesting. Okay, so leadership experiences and classes that will really push you to think. So, as we're kind of closing out this episode, any other advice?
I think one thing is just don't take yourself too seriously. Like enjoy, spend time with friends that push you forward and that you have fun with. And there's God willing, a lot of life in front of you in high school, and so I would make sure that you're not taking yourself so seriously that it doesn't leave room for kind of the fun things in life. And then I think the last thing I'd say, and maybe this sounds a little sappy or something, but like when you're in high school, you have all these new friends, you start driving, you get to spend more time with your friends, less time with your family. But don't underestimate the value of spending time with your family, whether it's your parents or aunts and uncles or grandparents or whatever. Your grandparents won't be with you forever. And you never know how long everyone else will be there, but you can learn some really good things. And when I look back, there's so many things I learned, as an example, from my parents, from my mom, from my dad, and I never would have thought that learning from my dad, who ran a small business. I first never thought I'd end up running his business for him, but also just the lessons I learned in that experience were as valuable as the lessons I learned at a top business school. And so there's a lot that you can learn, even though it's probably uncool to learn from your parents or your family. But while you have that time, take advantage of it. And whether that's, take the AirPods out a little bit more often or whatever, and talk in the car, something like that. I think there's some really cool things you can learn from family members. And I don't think I fully appreciated that when I was in high school.
Great. Well, that is it. Thanks, Mac, for being on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.